What if I told you that during World War II, three teenage girls, barely old enough to date, seduced Nazi officers, led them into the woods, and watched them fall to the ground, lifeless? No, this isn't a forgotten movie plot. It happened. And for decades, almost no one talked about it. They weren't trained spies, they were Dutch teenagers who used their youth and charm to carry out deadly missions that the Nazi regime never saw coming. Their names were Truus Oversteegen, Freddy Oversteegen, and Hannie Schaft. Barely in their teens when the war began, they went from handing out pamphlets to pulling triggers. These girls didn't fight with armies, they fought with deception, bicycles, and bullets. To the enemy, they looked harmless. Young, sweet, and unassuming, but underneath their skirts were pistols. Hidden in their pockets were forged ID, and behind every innocent smile was a mission that could end in death for someone else, or for them. They lured Nazi collaborators into alleyways. They shot soldiers from moving by. They infiltrated bars and parties, gathering information and waiting for the right moment to strike. The question is, how did they get there? What made three ordinary girls take up arms and become some of the most effective resistance fighters in the Netherlands? Could teenagers really seduce and kill trained Nazi soldiers? Was this an act of justice or vengeance? What does it say about a war when the bravest assassins were still too young to vote? And what happened after the war ended? Were they remembered as heroes or erased as liabilities? One of them died before liberation. The others lived long enough to see their story buried, then rediscovered. This is the haunting true story of the girls who fought the Nazis with lipstick, bicycles, and cold-blooded precision. In May of 1940, the skies above the Netherlands filled with the deafening roar of German aircraft. Nazi Germany had unleashed its blitzkrieg, lightning-fast warfare that overran Dutch defenses in just 5 brutal days. Rotterdam was reduced to rubble. In one devastating air raid, nearly 1,000 civilians were killed. With their military shattered and their cities burning, the Dutch government had no choice but to surrender. The occupation began, but peace never came. At first, the Nazis played a clever game. Businesses stayed open. Dutch officials kept their titles. Children still walked to school. The illusion of normal life lulled many into complacency. But below the surface, the Nazi regime was laying the foundations of complete control, especially over the Jewish population. Forced registration, exclusion from jobs, curfews, and deportation orders came swiftly. Whole families disappeared without a trace. The silence that followed was deafening. For everyday citizens, fear became a daily companion. Speaking out could mean arrest. Hiding a friend could cost your life. Trust evaporated. But not everyone could stay quiet. Not forever. The resistance didn't explode into action overnight. It ignited slowly, in kitchens and classrooms, among neighbors and strangers. People whispered, wrote pamphlets, printed underground newspapers. By 1941, networks of dissidents were organizing labor strikes and blowing up railways used to deport Jews. Most of this early resistance was non-violent, but the Nazis escalated. Public executions, retaliatory shootings, and mass arrests. So, the resistance changed. It hardened. It got deadly. And in the middle of this dark transformation, an unexpected force emerged: teenage girls. To the Nazis, girls were background noise, too young, too innocent to pose a threat. That blind spot would cost them. Girls like Truus and Freddy Oversteegen could pass through checkpoints unnoticed, ride bikes past guards without a second glance, share a drink with a soldier without raising suspicion. Their innocence became their camouflage. What the Germans never imagined was that the smiling girl at the bar was bait, that the schoolgirl on the bike had a pistol in her coat. This is where the war for the Netherlands took an unexpected turn, from the battlefield to the alleyways, from soldiers to schoolgirls turned assassins. Before they were freedom fighters, before they carried guns in bicycle baskets and lured Nazi soldiers to their deaths, Truus and Freddy Oversteegen were simply sisters. Two girls growing up in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Haarlem, raised by their mother Trayan. Life was hard. They slept on straw mattresses, often went hungry, and lived with little. But what they lacked in comfort, their mother made up for in principle. A fierce anti-fascist and committed communist, Trayan taught her daughters to think independently, question authority, and never ignore injustice, no matter the cost. During the 1930s, as refugees began to pour in from Germany, Trayan took in Jewish families, even when she had nothing to give. She fed them, gave them shelter, and treated them like her own. Freddie and Trues watched all this. They learned that doing the right thing wasn't convenient. It was necessary. So when Nazi troops stormed the Netherlands in 1940, they didn't need convincing. They were already resisting. By the time Trues was 16 and Freddie only 14, they were distributing anti-Nazi leaflets, spreading forbidden news, and guiding Jewish families to hiding places. But it wasn't enough. The horror was escalating. Deportations, executions, silence wasn't an option. One night, a knock came at the door. A resistance leader stood there, Frans van der Wiel of the Haarlem cell. He asked if the girls would join the armed fight. Trayan gave her blessing under one rule. They must never lose their humanity. The girls said yes. Trues was bold, charismatic, and commanding. Freddie was small, quiet, and often mistaken for a child. But together, they were perfect. Their first mission was arson. A Nazi supply warehouse had to be destroyed. They distracted the guards with flirtation, snuck inside, and lit it up. That night, they were taught to shoot. Not in a training field, but in a shed with real guns. They were teenagers, now they were soldiers. They didn't wear uniforms, they wore skirts and pigtails. Their weapons hid under coats or in bicycle baskets. And they became fluent in the art of pretending not to be afraid, not to know too much, not to carry death in their hands. Freddie remembered riding past Nazi checkpoints, smiling at guards who waved them through, never suspecting that beneath her coat was a loaded pistol. Their missions escalated from sabotage to surveillance to execution. Each step blurred the line between innocence and obligation, and in those uncertain early days of armed resistance, the two sisters found strength in each other. But they weren't alone for long, because soon they would meet a girl with red hair, a law student with a quiet fire in her eyes. Hannie Schaft would become their closest friend, and the most feared woman in Nazi-occupied Holland. Hannie Schaft didn't look like a killer, she looked like a student. A daughter, a dreamer. Born in 1920 to a progressive academic family, Hannie grew up in Haarlem with every intention of becoming a lawyer. She studied law at the University of Amsterdam, specializing in international law and human rights. Her goal? Free goal. To fight injustice with words, with reason, with the rule of law. But when Hitler's forces occupied the Netherlands, the law was no longer a shield. It was a weapon used to register Jews, deport families, and enforce silence. In 1943, when the Nazis demanded that all students sign a loyalty oath to the regime, Hannie refused. That single act of defiance ended her academic career. It also lit a fuse. No longer content to resist in silence, she joined the Raad van Verzet, the Council of Resistance. Her intelligence, fluency in German, and calm under pressure made her invaluable. So did her fiery red hair, which would become both her trademark and her greatest liability. She started with small acts, smuggling Jewish children to safety, stealing ID, relaying messages, but that wasn't enough, not for Hannie. She believed that freedom had to be fought for, not just hoped for. She moved into armed resistance. That's when she met Trues and Freddie. The three formed a cell that would become infamous. Trues was the bold one, Freddie the quiet assassin. Hannie was something else, a symbol the Nazis would come to fear. She embraced her role. She wore lipstick, dressed elegantly, styled her red hair like a movie star. She walked into German-controlled bars like she belonged, smiled, flirted, listened. Her German was flawless, her presence disarming. Officers would laugh with her one night and wind up dead the next. She didn't just collect intelligence, she carried out executions. Each target was chosen carefully. Nazi soldiers, Dutch collaborators, members of the NSB. Men who had handed over Jewish families. Oh, men who enforced tyranny. Her bullets weren't random. They were messages, warning. Every successful mission made her name grow darker in Nazi circles. They started calling her "other girl with the red hair." Whispers followed her. Her photo was circulated. Her description was broadcast. To stay alive, Hannie dyed her hair black and wore glasses. She changed safe houses, altered her gait, but the legend couldn't be hidden. Her courage made her a symbol, and symbols are dangerous because they inspire others. She never wanted glory, only justice. And even as the walls closed in, she never stopped. She kept taking missions. She kept fighting. Because she believed one terrifying truth. If she didn't do it, no one else would. In war, power comes in many forms: guns, tanks, maps, intelligence. But True's Freddy and Hanny discovered a weapon that Nazi soldiers never saw coming: their appearance. The teenage girls of the Dutch resistance understood something the Germans never questioned. To the occupying forces, girls were harmless, non-threatening, irrelevant, and that's exactly why they were perfect. German officers stationed in the Netherlands were far removed from the horrors of the Eastern Front. Here, they sipped wine in cafes, danced in ballrooms, and flirted with Dutch women. They let their guard down. They believed they were safe. That illusion would cost them dearly. Trues would walk into a tavern like any other young woman. Fashionable coat, bright smile, just another pretty girl in a city under occupation. She'd order a drink, chat with an officer, laugh at his jokes. Freddy would be nearby, pretending not to watch. The officer, intoxicated by charm and ego, would take the bait. When she invited him for a walk, he followed. They'd step into the darkness of a forest. He'd lean in and never lean back out. At first, the sisters acted as leaders. They brought the targets to the edge. The resistance pulled the trigger a handle. But with time, that changed. Trues and Freddy learned how to shoot, how to kill. Their transformation was slow but deliberate. They became executioners. One operation left a mark on Freddy. She and Trues targeted a Dutch collaborator, someone who'd handed over Jewish neighbors for favor with the Nazis. As they pedaled past him on a quiet street, Freddy raised her pistol and fired. The man collapsed. They didn't stop. They rode through the city's alleys and disappeared. Freddy later admitted it broke something inside her. "We cried about it afterward," she said. "It never suited us. One loses everything. It poisons the beautiful things in life. They weren't heartless. They were determined and haunted." Their tactics were terrifyingly effective. No one suspected the teenage girls in skirts. No one saw danger in the flutter of ribbons or the squeak of bicycle brakes. That was the genius. That was the horror. Henny refined the method into an art form. Fluent in German, she walked straight into enemy conversations. She gathered intel, memorized routes, sometimes joked with the very men she would later eliminate. Her red hair became a whispered terror. She curled it before missions, applied lipstick. When asked why, she once said, "I'll die clean and beautiful." It wasn't vanity. It was rebellion. She refused to let the war take her soul, even as she took lives. Their seduction wasn't about pleasure. It was about access, about timing, about leverage. It was psychological warfare, executed with precision and disguise. They used everything they had: their age, their looks, their ability to be underestimated. But with every mission came risk. If caught, they would face torture, sexual violence, public execution. The Nazis did not treat resistance fighters with mercy, especially not women. And yet the girls kept going, because they believed every bullet fired, every collaborator silenced, slowed the machine down. And sometimes that was all they could do. They weren't femme fatales from a spy novel. They were teenagers, brave, broken, and unforgettable. Their innocence was their weapon, their courage deadly. Killing even when it's justified leaves a mark. For Trues, Freddy, and Hanny, the mission wasn't about glory or vengeance. It was survival, resistance, justice. But that didn't make it easier. The first time Freddy killed someone, it wasn't a Nazi soldier. It was a Dutch collaborator, a man who had turned over Jewish families to the Germans for favor and profit. The resistance marked him for death. Freddy, just 15, rode on the back of her sister's bicycle. When they spotted him walking home, she raised her pistol and fired. The man fell. The mission was a success. But afterward, she wept. "We cried about it," Trues would later recall. "We did not feel it suited us. It never suits anybody, unless they are real criminals. One loses everything. It poisons the beautiful things in life." There were no medals, no parades, only silence. And the next mission, the trauma built slowly like dust on glass. They laughed less, trusted fewer people. They became numb to danger, but never to death. Trues smiled during operations, not from joy, but as part of the illusion. Hanny, always the most composed, once showed up at Trues' door after a mission, trembling, soaked, unable to speak. Her red hair had been seen. The Nazis were hunting for her now. She couldn't even hold a glass of water without shaking. The fear wasn't just for themselves. Every mission risked retaliation. The Nazis often responded to resistance activity with public executions. Innocent civilians, neighbors, children were dragged into the streets and shot. The girls knew this. Every bullet fired could cost someone else their life. Still, they continued, not because they enjoyed it, not because they were fearless, but because someone had to. If they didn't fight, who would? Their mother's rule echoed in their minds, stay human. But in war, that's the hardest rule to follow. Every kill left a scar. Every operation took something from them. But they believed the cause was worth it. They believed that even if they lost pieces of themselves in the process, those pieces might help save someone else. By early 1945, Hannie Schaft was one of the most wanted people in the Netherlands. Her name echoed through resistance circles like a battle cry and through Nazi corridors like a curse. She had become a ghost they couldn't catch, the girl with the red hair. And in a regime obsessed with order and control, nothing was more dangerous than a symbol of defiance they couldn't erase. For months, Hannie had pushed her luck. She moved from one safe house to another, used false identities, and dyed her vibrant red hair black. Her missions became bolder. She transported weapons, carried messages between resistance cells, executed collaborators. The war was ending, but Hannie didn't slow down. If anything, she accelerated, determined to strike one last blow before liberation. Her comrades begged her to stay hidden. She refused. The cause still needed her. She still had work to do. On March 21, 1945, just 18 days before Nazi Germany surrendered, she was stopped at a routine German checkpoint in Haarlem. Her bicycle basket held 2 underground resistance newspapers and a concealed pistol. She gave a false name, Joanna. Her hair was still black. Her tone was calm. But the soldiers were alert. She was arrested and taken to prison in Amsterdam. There, the Gestapo began their work. She was placed in solitary, beaten, deprived of sleep, starved. Still, Hannie never gave them names. She never betrayed her comrades, but over time, the evidence betrayed her. Her dyed hair began to grow out. Red roots appeared. A witness remembered her face. The legend they feared was now in their custody. There would be no trial, no negotiation. Hitler had issued the order himself. Hannie Schaft was to be executed. She wasn't just an operative. She was a political threat. Icon. On April 17, 1945, 2 Dutch collaborators, Martinus Kaper and Martin Schaft, led her into the dunes near Overveen. The execution was meant to be clean, one shot, quick. But the first bullet only grazed her. Bleeding but alive, Hannie turned and looked them in the eyes. "I shoot better," she said. The second shot ended it. She was buried in a shallow, unmarked grave. The Nazis thought they had silenced her, but they had only made her immortal. 18 days later, the war ended. Hannie's body was recovered that November. She was the only woman buried among more than 400 resistance fighters. Queen Wilhelmina attended her state funeral. She was hailed a national hero, but her legacy would remain complicated. Her ties to communist factions made her controversial during the Cold War. Still, for Truus and Freddie, she wasn't a symbol or a controversy. She was their friend, their comrade, their sister in arms, and her death would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They had survived. She hadn't. And now they had one last mission, to make sure the world would remember her name. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, the Netherlands celebrated liberation. But for Truus and Freddie Overstegen, freedom didn't bring relief. It brought silence. The war was over, but their memories were not. The missions they'd carried out, the lives they'd taken, the friend they'd buried, all of it remained, and no one wanted to talk about it. Truus married a fellow resistance fighter. Freddie married an engineer. They tried to return to ordinary life, but nothing about their lives had ever been ordinary. They had grown up in the shadows of death. Normalcy was unfamiliar terrain. Truus spoke publicly about their work, reluctantly at first, then more frequently as the years passed. But Freddie stayed silent. For decades, the trauma was deep, especially for Freddie. She carried it alone. She rarely spoke of the missions. She never glorified what they had done. Her son would later explain she hated it, and she hated herself for doing it. It wasn't shame, it was pain. And Hannie's story, the girl with the red hair, the martyr of the Dutch resistance, was almost erased. Despite a state funeral and national mourning in 1945, political winds soon shifted. Hannie had worked closely with communist factions during the war. As the Cold War escalated, that legacy became inconvenient. In 1951, public commemorations of her death were banned. Police blocked mourners. Tanks were deployed to prevent ceremonies. The country she had died for now treated her as a liability. Trews refused to let that happen. She became an activist, a sculptor, a storyteller. She founded the Hannie Shaft Memorial Foundation. She gave interviews, held lectures. She told the story no one else would. In 1982, she unveiled a statue of Hannie in their hometown of Harlem, a quiet monument to defiance. Freddie didn't attend public events, but she remembered in her own way, and eventually the world caught up. In the 1990s, the Dutch government officially recognized Hannie again. Schools were named after her. Streets, the last Sunday of every November, became a national day of remembrance. But for nearly half a century, 3 teenage girls who had risked everything to fight the Nazis were nearly forgotten, until they forced the world to remember. Today, the names Truus Oversteegen, Freddie Oversteegen, and Hannie Shaft are etched into Dutch history. But that recognition took decades, and it came with complications. They weren't perfect heroes. They were complicated, conflicted, and deeply human. They blurred the lines between justice and vengeance, innocence and violence. In 2014, both Truus and Freddie were finally awarded the Mobilization War Cross, one of the highest honors in the Netherlands. They were in their late 80s. Truus had spent years educating young people about the cost of resistance. Freddie, after a lifetime of silence, began to share her story before she died in 2018. They weren't celebrated for being killers. They were honored for their courage to act, when most people didn't. They were girls who picked up guns, not because they wanted to, but because someone had to. They used seduction as strategy, innocence as armor, and their legacy isn't just about what they did, it's about what it cost them. So what does it really mean to be a hero? Is it bravery, sacrifice, or the willingness to lose a part of yourself to protect someone else? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it. Let history never forget them.